many years of work of stirring the waters, the vestry and I sent a letter out to the congregation committing us to becoming an anti-racist church. And I'll just say a couple of things about that basic understanding and that commitment. First of all is that it springs from our faith and intention to be disciples of Christ, who set for us the summary of the law of love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. It springs forth for us from our own baptismal covenant, that we will strive for justice and peace, and that we will seek the dignity of every human being. And it springs forth from our own parish commitment to be seeking to live God's love. It also springs forth from a recognition of the function of race and racism in our nation, and in particular that given the structures within our society, that neutrality is not an option, that one is either participating in the system as it has been set forth by 400 years of history, or one is questioning and challenging that system. And so this statement is an affirmation of our intention to be about questioning and challenging that. And in working with others in the last couple of months, thinking about, great, we've made a commitment to become an anti-racist church. What might that mean? What might that look like? And sort of approaching that from what it's not. Becoming an anti-racist church is not a project. It is not something that has an end goal, except perhaps in the coming of God in glory. So if it's not a project and it's not an end goal, and instead it is a commitment to how we live our lives, I've come to see it as akin to saying, as we do at St. Columba's, that we're committed to following Christ, or that we're committed to developing, that we're committed to prayer, we're committed to generosity, we're committed to care of neighbor and compassion and service, and that it's a core element of who we are. You don't have to be a Christian to be an anti-racist, but for us at St. Columba's, that is fundamental. And I will be, I've presented to the vestry, and the vestry will be meeting tomorrow evening, and subject to their approval, we're going to be hiring a couple of consultants to work with us. And I just say that, and because in the interviews that I did, and in that I was joined by Patty and Bill Jensen and Carol Tyrants Graves, and we met with a number of different consultants, and those conversations helped us hone and clarify what it is that we think we're trying to do in becoming an anti-racist church. And we recognized that we wanted our goal to this commitment to be evident in three ways: as individuals, and as a congregation, and in the outward expression of our faith. So as individuals, what I mean by that is that I will take as a marker that we're on the way toward becoming anti-racist if a growing number of us are able to say, I am working on this in my own life, and I am addressing this in my own life. And I will just speak for myself that as a white, straight male, well-educated, used to privilege, I am aware that this is something that I have been and want to and need to continue to pay attention to in a whole host of ways on my own. And that's just an essential thing for me. So one of the things that I am looking for us to do is to be, just as we might find ways to support one another in developing practices of prayer, support one another in being generous and caring for our neighbors, so we will support one another in our individual acts of addressing issues of race and privilege. As a congregation, our thought there is to look at how, well, what's the story that we tell ourselves, about what it means to be St. Columbans or Christians or Americans, and how do the stories of our past inform our dreams and priorities for the future. And it will be important for us to, and I know that some of you have already done a bunch of this historical work, but what were the pressures and issues that were at play in the founding days of St. Columba's, and how along the way in the nearly 150 years since have we been participated in and perpetuated structures that serve to confirm racist practice, and in what ways have we been standing and taking action and working to become anti-racist. We're not the first bunch of St. Columbans to be committed to this kind of work. Many others before us have been committed to this kind of work, and would be valuable to tap into that. And that's us doing some broader, deeper analysis, not only of history, but of our neighborhood, of the Episcopal Church, and some of the structures and pressures at play as in the larger context. And thirdly, in outward expression, not only what am I doing this as what are each of us doing about this as individuals, and how do we now come to understand ourselves as a congregation, our own past and what its implications are for us. But how then does that prompt us to organize ourselves or reprioritize matters differently? And I don't want to presuppose what that's going to look like and what actions we're going to take. But the kind of thing that I'm imagining is that it could be anything from a reprioritization of our budget to a commitment to being a more racially diverse congregation, or a more racially diverse staff, or to seek out and form partnerships with others and engage in different kinds of cross-city or cross-region efforts. I don't know what those outward expressions are going to be yet. That's not something that, that's something that we can need to work on together. But I know that that if we're just doing this internally and not doing it in outward expression, then the rubber hasn't yet hit the road. Yeah. So I said a few minutes ago that that I look forward to bringing on board some consultants to work with us, and what my expectation and hope is that they're going to help us create a map for doing some of this. that they are going to help us as a congregation, furthering the work of Stirring the Waters in developing shared vocabulary around this. Even some of the words that I'm using, I'm aware that some of you may disagree with or want further clarification on definitions. I'm making all sorts of assumptions, and I am aware that we are certainly not of one perspective and one mind on this. So helping us get some of that, that common language, and mapping out a process whereby we can do a bunch of that systemic work, looking at our history. They're not going to come in and do it for us. They're going to help us do it ourselves. And I don't know that they will also help us explore what partnerships might look like. I can imagine that that's something that we can figure out. We won't need consultants. Specifically, what I anticipate them doing is in this coming month of November, gathering with a collection of the identified leaders of St. Columba's, which is to say our vestry and clergy and program staff, and figure out how we where in the organizational structure we're going to locate this work. Then they're also going to be meeting with Stirring the Waters. And that's the, and in a sense, in my conversation with the consultants, it's recognizing that what we want to do, what's important to do, is to approach this both from the ground up. And it's those of you that have been part of Stirring the Water, some of you for quite a number of years, who have been raising this issue, being committed to this issue and exploring it and inviting others into it. The work needs to be grounded there with you. And it also needs to, for it to be effective, it needs to have the support and the buy-in and clarity from the leaders of the organization, me and the vestry and other members of the staff. So they're going to have a couple of meetings with those groups, and then anticipate a couple of meetings with the congregation as a whole, probably in the month of January. We're not going to try to squeeze that in December. And then we anticipate the convening of a task force to guide us in the structural work. And in part, that's coming out of conversation with Stirring the Waters, where Stirring the Waters has been committed to dialogue and conversation and learning, and they will continue to do that. This is another group that will work in concert with Stirring the Waters and the vestry to help us do the systemic stuff. And we anticipate that that will get underway right at the beginning of the new year. And I will be, I think it's important back to what I said in the beginning, that this is not a project. So I want to build this in so that it has real lasting, there's a lasting commitment that lasts well beyond me, you, and many others. And so I see the task force being comprised of a representation from the vestry and Stirring the Waters, but will also be extending an invitation to others in the congregation, anyone who wants to raise her or his hand and says, I want to be part of that work. But I'd like to have this group be ultimately approved by the vestry so that it's got that sort of core commitment from the authority of the church. Let me stop there. Well, let me just, before, so not only in the beginning of the new year will there be an opportunity for those who wish, and when I say that, I'm not meaning anybody and everybody that raises their hand can be part of the task force, because it's going to need to be a finite size. But anybody and everybody, I believe, can be part of stirring the waters, and is invited to be, and will be invited through our congregational gatherings to take up this work. And that's what I have to share by way of an update. And I'm happy to have us open this up for conversation and hear comments or concerns or hopes, and whatever's on your heart and mind about how we further this work.
There are over 50 of us on this meeting call. So if you could raise your hand to speak, we'll happily call on you. Feel free also to put a comment or question in the chat.
I see Sandra.
Helene's raising her hand. I see Helene raising her hand.
Oh, so sorry.
Oh, and Sandra as well.
Wait a second. Cami, it's the hand raising isn't showing up on my.
They're just physically raising their hands.
Oh, well, let me change my view. So Sandra, I believe, raised her hand. So Sandra, if you could unmute yourself, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A few months ago now, I think I sent to Bill and Patty sort of an outline of research that has been done over the years by me and by some others relating to the earlier years of St. Columba's, its founding as a child of St. Albans, and then evolving into St. Columba's assuming a relationship with a church that was formerly located in the so-called Reno community. And then the Reno community itself was driven out as a result of an effort to further racially segregate the city. So I'm not sure what has happened with the outline of research that I sent to Bill and Patty. And I have done some additional work on that. And I would really like to sort of flesh it out and connect with a larger group of folks about how we want to handle the story. It's a somewhat difficult story, but also has a lot of positives in it as well. And I do see a path forward for St. Columba's to try to establish a stronger relationship with the church that came to essentially replace the church at the Reno community. It's now over in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, known as St. George's Parish, and largely African-American parish. And so I'm not sure what we want to do with that story. It sounds like Ledlie has in mind maybe using consultants to assist us with that. You know, I'm really not sure, but I think it's a very important story, and it shows largely how the Episcopal Church was very much a segregated institution for a long time. Really, as far as I can tell, until the 1950s. And, you know, with efforts made here and there to bridge the divide, but there was still, I think, as was the rest of American society, a deliberate segregation within the church. Anyway, so that's sort of maybe more than you wanted to hear, but I would like to know what we should be doing with that.
So, Sandra, thank you. I'm not sure, I won't speak for what, I'm not sure what Patty and Bill have in mind, but that's exactly the kind of story and history that I think is hugely important for a majority of us at St. Columba's to know that kind of story. I expect we all have different narratives about who St. Columba's is and who we are, and that is shaped by our understanding of the Episcopal Church or our experience of worshiping here. And a lot of us don't know a lot of the history. Some of us do, but I think we can and need to be intentional about incorporating elements just like that into our larger collective shared understanding of our identity. And some of you know that our 150th anniversary is on the horizon in 2024. So this is a particularly opportune time to be collecting those stories. Thank you.
I believe Helene had raised her hand. Helene, you can unmute yourself.
So everybody, I just wanted you to know that this is a joyful journey. This is a journey where we are going to be reunited. We're going to become whole. And I don't want us to forget that. I mean, there's a lot of grim and there's some pain, but can we just hold on to the joy, and can we just find ways to celebrate our journey? Really, it'll be joyful. We're so lucky to be on this journey, and we're so lucky to bring wonderful people into our lives that we have shut out forever. So please, please remember the joy that's waiting for us. And I just really, we're becoming whole. This is a wonderful journey. So that's all I wanted to tell you. It doesn't have to be grim, and you know, there's joy in this, okay? So that's all I want to say, bye.
Thank you, Helene. I believe Bob Musel, he's still wanting to speak. You could unmute.
Well, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. I was not sure that I was showing that you raise your hand, but I never miss an opportunity. I'm sorry. I was thinking about the history, and Karen and I have been visiting and now virtually, so I don't want to jump in too much. In our former church, they did a history, and there were some very positive things. It had originally been in Mount Pleasant, was founded by people who were actually anti-slavery, had come from New England, and it was a strong tradition that had been lost. At the same time, when they moved to the suburbs, guess what? Turned all white, racist, whatever. But what I really want to say right now is, couldn't someone just write up, Sandra, the history that you've uncovered and just share it? Because often we want to mull and discuss, and we don't need a consultant to. Anyway, I'm just very curious, and I'm interested in the history of the church and racism and so on, and it's just fabulous. And I'm volunteering somebody, not me. Anyway, it's nice to be with you all and meet you this way. I'm going to retreat back to my observer status.
Lauren, would you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise up a couple responses in the chat to the history, and building on what Bob just said. Someone had asked, would it be shared? The effort that Sandra's going into, and then Karen highlighted that the cathedral is clearly making an effort to integrate. Might we communicate with the cathedral on this history effort?
Actually, I do also want to share that Sandra has shared this with the Stirring the Waters Ministry, and she has done a tremendous amount of work. And we have not responded to her about getting that out or how to move it forward. So it's heartening to know that people are wanting that, and a good little prod for us to get with Ledlie and others about doing so.
I guess I would also say, just in response to Bob, is that no, we don't need to make this more complicated than it needs to be. Some of it's just right here, and we just need to put it together and go with it. I see Sarah Whitener.
Yeah, a question for Sandra is, Sandra, in doing your research, do you have partners at St. George's that helped you with your history?
Well, let me respond to that. That is one of the issues that I have really raised in connection with the research, is whether and how to go about communicating with St. George's. I did not believe that I should simply start reaching out to folks on my own. I felt like we needed to come to some understandings within the parish about how we want to proceed with a relationship with St. George's. It's my understanding from someone else who did some research a few years ago that there are parishioners currently at St. George's in Bloomingdale who recall the church that used to exist in the Reno community and that moved over there. But there are some differences between those two parishes, the Fort Reno parish and the one that's over in Bloomingdale now. So they also now have a white female rector, which is interesting all by itself, although all the vestry appear to be African-American. Anyway, I saw it as a sort of a more sensitive issue that we need to have some better understandings about what to do with that. I sent it to Bill and Patty and probably folks on the vestry or Ledlie and the leadership of the church, perhaps even in conjunction with, with the bishop's office or the bishop herself, would want to try to develop some exchange and relationship with St. George's on this topic.
We have some other hands raised, I believe. Greg. Lauren, sorry, go ahead.
Just two more things from the chat, because I'm getting private messages as well. But there's just another point on the issue of sharing the history. And Karen mentioned that you could see the sharing of the initial narrative as a first version that could be added to and revised like all good history. So to share it now as an evolving document with others in various forms might also contribute down the road to how people perceive it. And then there was another question, just shifting topics. Is there a perception or understanding of why the parish is less diverse than it might be?
I don't have an answer to that. But it's interesting. In meeting with the different consultants, we were describing St. Columba's and said it's predominantly white congregation. Oh no, maybe this was actually not with the consultants. This was when Gail Fisher Stewart led the forum, and somebody asked, where might you start? And she said, well, why don't you spend some time asking yourselves, why are we such a white congregation?
I would add that,
and probe into what the various answers to that question, where that might lead us.
I agree, Ledlie. I would add that so much of racism is unintentional and intentional. I think that's what we're going to explore as we take this journey. And the unintentional is intentional, and silence is violence. But that's what we're going to explore.
Greg, had you wanted to make a comment? unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I would love to. Number one, I just want to say thanks for having this. Thanks for Ledlie Lang for initiating this whole thing. Fantastic. It's come a long way. I just want to express my concern, and it's the way people define terms now, and the authors that have written books about this may be defining it in a different way, but I have an issue with the word anti-racist. I helped start the 911 Unity Walk here in DC that expanded to other cities too, but we were choosing a name and we decided not to use Unity March because March had sort of innuendos of being an activist type of program. So we chose to use Unity Walk. Now, anti-racist means, I suppose, you know, that adds gravity to whether you're a racist or not a racist. And in conjunction with that, I also want to say, I want to make sure our church is, well, I can't make sure, but this is my conviction, that our church doesn't become unwelcoming to people that are racist, or that people, even a KKK member. Now, we're a church, we're an organization that tries to lift people up and heal people from all beliefs and all, you know, tracks. And I just think that if that becomes a political issue, which I believe a nonprofit or whatever is really not about. Now, they may not want to be part of a church where everybody has a conviction to rid themselves of racism, or people might give them dirty looks if they know they're an outward racist. But the point I'm trying to make is we're all human and we're all trying to heal. We're all trying to be lifted up and we're pursuing God. So, you know, I just am trying to frame everything so that we don't lose sight of our main purpose by getting into advocacy for one branch. So that's and I'm a racist, but I am an ally for all those that are oppressed and that don't have the opportunity I do as a white male, as Ledlie said, in the world. And so I just want to make that clear. Cheers.
Thank you, Greg.
Hi, this is Carol Graves.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Carol, and then Gina, and then Barbara.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment about the work that Sandra did, history. I don't know if that's sort of a project that's part history as well as with stirring the waters, but you know, I think it's certainly something that should go forward. And I definitely know some people at St. George's, so I could help make some connections in that regard.
Great. That's an important note for us to carry forward. Thank you. Gina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. I'm so happy we're having this conversation, and it's great to hear all of these points. I just wanted to share that I was really struck. I'm listening to Bishop Curry's new book being read by him on a book on tape, and he tells a really profound story, which maybe some of you have heard before, but I hadn't, about how his family came to be part of the Episcopal Church, which was in the 1940s. His father going to a service with his wife-to-be, who became ultimately Bishop Curry's mother, and how his father saw the common cup, and it was a mostly white group of people, and was curious to see what would happen when his girlfriend went forward to drink from the cup, and then was amazed that right afterwards a group of white people drank right after her. And this was in the 1940s, and that was what motivated him to join the Episcopal Church, having been raised Southern Baptist. And so I thought that was quite a moving story, and I expect we have a lot of negative things in our history, but I think it's also important to build on the positive too, and to see, like, if we have a story like that in our history, that suggests that God has been working in our community for decades, and let's try to build on those positive, and let's acknowledge where we've made huge mistakes and keep moving forward. But I definitely, I felt really moved when I heard that, and I felt proud to be a part of this this community of the Episcopal Church, even having heard that story from Bishop Curry. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Barbara and then Dawn.
I just have a quick note. For the historical work, didn't Rose Duncan grow up at St. George's?
Yes.
And wouldn't that be an incredible link for, I mean, she could maybe address the history specifically.
Yep.
Thank you. Dawn.
Yes, and talking about sort of the wider history, my grandparents, my mother's side, moved to DC from Boston, probably the 40s, 50s. And they raised my mother and her two sisters at St. Luke's Church. And I was baptized at St. Luke's Church. I was raised in New Jersey, but I was baptized here. And I remember when I was teaching Rite 13 at St. Columba's, it was Dave Menges, whose father was a priest at St. Columba's. So he was raised in the church. He was a PK, a child, a kid of a priest. He told me that when he was raised at St. Columba's and as a child, his parents sent him to St. Luke's Church, which is the church where my mother's family was being raised, to go to Sunday school or Bible study or something in the summers, because the program was considered so exceptional that some people sent their kids there. Now, St. Luke's Church was a Black church. So there were, I think it was Gina who was saying, there are some backstories going on here. Some things have been going on for generations. And now hopefully we have some people around who can help us to confirm some of what's been going on. But I remember Dave telling me that.
Thank you, Dawn. Lauren, anything else from the chat?
Yeah, so a couple, I think there's a lot of energy around this history project. One question was, are we only going to connect with the one parish, St. George's? And then someone else mentioned that St. George's was already partnered with Trinity DC, so we could also reach out to them.
Good. To the first question, I have no preconceived idea of who or how many churches we would be in connection with. While we're on this, let me just share two photographs I found. Some of you will recognize these. Let me pull this up for everybody. This is the picture of St. Columba's setting its cornerstone down. And let me show you, just hone in on this if I can. Hold on one sec. I'm not as good at this as I might be. As I show you a second photograph. Come on. This is a close-up of the same picture. And what you recognize is that it is a sea of white parishioners, and there are two Black men laying the cornerstone. And of course, there's plenty of scripture about cornerstones becoming stumbling blocks, and for the preacher in me, it opens up all sorts of thoughts about how to go at that history, and let the pictures do some talking for us too.
We have a few minutes left if there are other questions or comments. Oh, Catherine? Karen, sorry. You may unmute, yeah.
I'm a newcomer to St. Columba. I'm just thrilled to be part of a church that wants to do this much more comprehensive work that isn't just about being nice, but is really about going deep into the structures that organize our lives and that make us who we are and that can unmake the parts that we find are oppressive to other people and to ourselves as well. But I just wanted to, and I love the idea of the history and the oral history that comes out from the multiple points of view. I think that'll be, make it a very, more like a living document and to have multiple perspectives. But I also wanted to say how important the focus on understanding structures of white supremacy when it takes forms and doesn't use that language and doesn't look like it's about race at all, and how important it is to be able to be part of identifying that as particularly as white people, but also undoing it. And as a workshop I was part of yesterday, which had to do with how colleges move in relationships with communities, was led by a woman who leads anti-racism education. She's African-American in Durham, North Carolina. And she does a lot of work with children, interracial children. But she said at the end, two things that I circled because I was thinking about this conversation. One of them was how important it is to shift from shame to humility and from guilt to humility, because the humility will be one way in which you can move in the, she said, Black people don't know what, they don't want your guilt and they don't want your shame. She said, but humility will give a more room and space for other things to happen in your life. The other thing she talked about at the very end was, and this may speak to one of Greg's concerns, you might not like this language either. She talked about moving, that there is some movement among some people doing the racial justice work from ally work, though I still like that term a lot, and the more radical transformative version of it. But some people now talk about being co-conspirators. That is that they are really working together as allies, I would say, in order to create a different a world that isn't built on the foundation stone of white supremacy. And she said the work of dismantling white supremacy is the work of white people. So while we may and we want to form partnerships and do other things, that it's really figuring out where it is and the multiple places, so that as we move out in the world, we move out in the world not just as St. Columbans, but out in the world as educators and accountants and lawyers and nurses and all the things that we are in our communities. So how in those worlds will we also bring a different way of being into the mix?
Thank you. Patty, I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna go upstairs and join our in-person worship. So I need to step away, but thank you all very, very much for this time and for your commitment and your interest. And thank you to members of Stirring the Waters for organizing this and leading the way for us. As I don't know if there's closing stuff that handing it back to you, Patty and Bill.
Okay, great. Well, Nancy had a comment, and then if there are a couple more, and then we'll end with the prayer. Thank you so much, Ledlie. Nancy, did you want to unmute and share?
I'm trying.
There you go, you did it.
Okay. Well, some years ago, we invited a Black church to take part at one of our services. I don't know if any of you remember that. And it was interesting to me because it became a much more lively performance. The tradition, I think, among this particular church was one of a lot of physical motion and excitement. And some of our parishioners complained afterwards about it, that we're used to being our well-behaved Episcopal selves, I guess. And in other cases, it was a different kind of thing. So I think it's a matter of understanding our different approaches and tolerating them, and maybe learning from each other about them and what we can do, but to know about it. So I have no way to solve this dilemma, but it's one that's there, I think.
Thank you. Any other? Yes,
Patty,
Karen.
if I could.
Oh, so sorry. Karen and then Carolyn.
Related to Nancy's comment, I had the great opportunity to tune into the cathedral when Otis Moss III presented, well, gave a sermon, but it was very musical. And then last week, Krista Tippett also spoke with him about his work. And so I think there's a wonderful, there's a writer, a speaker, someone whose work we could connect with to give guidance.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Yeah, I would just like to give a plug to Sacred Ground. It was great to hear some stories this morning, some personal reflections, and it's a 10-session course, a time to really connect with other people about their histories. And I believe that the classes that are being offered this fall are full. However, do be on the lookout for other sessions that are offered this winter. To be in dialogue, deeper dialogue.
Yes, thanks, Carolyn. And I appreciate the comments of Greg and others, that willingness to share where you are and how this journey is going to be a personal one, and hopefully one we take together with humility, love, and faith.
Patty, Sarah Whitener had a question.
Oh, thank you.
Go up.
Sarah.
Unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. I just wanted to say that the thought of a history coming out now is just very exciting to me, because all these things are coming together at the same time. Not only the Black Lives Matter movement in the country, but just in our area. You know, Wilson High School is changing its name, and one of the main reason, of course, is the name Wilson, but there's also this growing response to the fact that Wilson and Deal were built at a time when the Fort Reno community was raised. Oh. And if that's where St. George's was, or where this, I don't know the history. I would love to know the history. What happened then? Because it's what everybody wants to know. And it's very important, I think, for our future peace and partnership with all different people. So that's great. And then also there's the piece about the cemetery that's out between West Bard and River Road. And they're trying to sort out, well, actually, it's not a cemetery for the Macedonia Baptist Church. It's a cemetery for the church at Fort Reno. So I don't know what's true and what isn't, but I'm just saying it's all in the mix right now, and a history would be fabulous.
Thank you. Okay. You want to say anything in closing before?
Well, I just want to thank you all for taking part in this conversation. This will be an ongoing conversation in this congregation. We want everyone to feel included. Going to Greg's point, we are a church. We welcome all. We listen to all, but we do that as Christians seeking justice and mercy. So,
we thank you.
In the absence of Ledlie praying us out, I will pray us out. Ledlie had to go conduct a service, which is a nice thing in and of itself. God of creation, we come to you in prayer, thankful for the many blessings bestowed on your people. We ask that you increase our knowledge of one another, making us more aware of the inequities that separate us, the color of our skin, the history we inherited, and the many injustices that continue to blind us. Make us agents of change in our everyday lives. Instill in us a new sense of responsibility and urgency to stand for truth and what is right for all your people. And finally, give us, we pray, courage to sustain our witness against injustice in deep and abiding love. Amen.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good to see you all.